correct me if I'm wrong, this is like your first summer as a pro, as an MB in the association, that you get an off season. I mean, last year you guys have the delay, the bubble, the finals run, and then you turn around a month later and start another season. Now you get some time off, not just to decompress, because you do need to do that, but also to work on your game a little bit, focus on areas of improvement. Have you highlighted those areas of improvement? Like, are there things you came into this summer thinking, this is what I want to work on? Or is it just sort of a, let's decompress and then let's sort of just get back to basketball broadly?
No, I try to take a very kind of practical approach to my development. I think that if you're not focusing in on one or two things, then you can kind of start to get pulled in a lot of different directions. And, I just think it's important to kind of zero in on what it is. And I do have some things that I'm working on. Definitely my body being a huge one. That's a big emphasis. That's honestly the reason that I'm out here. I've connected with a guy out here who I think is one of the best. And that's not any knock on Miami. I think Miami is the premier organization when it comes to strength and conditioning. Shout out to Bill Ferran, the original, the pioneer.
Shout out Bill.
And then also Eric Ferran, who's carrying the metaphorical torch. But no, for the off season, that's a huge emphasis. And then on the court, it's just about continuing to grow and develop. I'm not going to get too much in the nitty gritty, just because. I mean, all right, fine. I'll give a little nugget. Obviously, for me, it's keep the main thing the main thing. I understand what I'm good at. I think that's part of my strength as a player, is that I know who I am and I don't try to do more than that. Now, with that being said, you never want to put yourself in a box. So there's always room for improvement and development. I have a lot of room for improvement offensively, particularly when it comes to inside the three-point line. So a huge emphasis for me this year is establishing a go-to two-pointer. Basically, something to keep defenses honest, and we're working through that right now. Whether it's a mid-range pull-up, whether it's a floater, I think I'm pretty solid around the rim finishing. My percentages at the rim are pretty good. Now I just need to get there more often, and then the other big emphasis is getting to the free throw line. That's kind of the way that I look at it. Is if I can get to the rim, or just have a effective two that I know I can get to and feel comfortable really getting to, the same way I'm comfortable shooting, the threes that I do, then that'll allow me to take a big step. And then also if I'm able to get to the free throw line, and it's nothing crazy, right? Like if you look at it as simple as, if I get one more layup a game, that's 2 points. If I get to the line one more time a game, that's 2 more trips to the line. And I'm a pretty good free throw shooter, so that's basically another 2 points. And all of a sudden now, when you're looking, it seems very reasonable, and you start to work within the margins. That's going from averaging 13 or whatever it is points a game to 17, and that's a big difference in winning and losing in an NBA season. When you look at the macro stats, the stats from the 10,000 foot view, how fine those margins are. 4 points in a game can be a big difference. And then obviously my body, I think, will really help me on offense, but really where I think it'll help me the most is on defense. And that's also a big area where I feel I can really, really improve. So that's basically kind of what I'm looking for coming into the offseason, and it's what I've already started to approach.
Do you just rep out? So like you say you want to work on, and it sounds like you don't want to get too nitty-gritty.
Yeah, I don't really want to get into it.
But is it just, when you say you're coming in with an emphasis on a 2-point shot, is it just repping that out until it's second nature? Is it like toying around to figure out what feels comfortable? Like what is it? What does the process there look like?
I mean, it's kind of a combination, right? I think a big one is you can work on and develop all the skills you want in the summer, but if you're not going to be put in those situations when you're wearing your team's jersey, what are you really doing it for? And I think there's times and places to like kind of be creative and step outside the box, but there's really only maybe more than a handful, but we'll say 1 or 2 guys on every team that get the luxury of you can just be fully in your bag all the time. And I know I'm not one of those guys. So for me, it's about finding a 2 in our offense, or in a general NBA offense that you can get to, you're comfortable with, and you can be effective in it. And that's a feel it out process. Now, yeah.
That's really interesting though, because that, it sounds like, is the impetus is on you to think about that though, right? Like you're having to think about your offense Miami's offense, right? Like figuring out where in your experience you have those pockets to find those shots. Like we were talking earlier today about like just knowing who you are in the NBA. And so if you're a guy who, has your back to the basket a lot of the time, you don't necessarily need to be practicing, coming off a pick and roll. Or if you're a guy who handles the ball a lot, you don't necessarily need to be working on your post moves unless you're a guy who gets to that a lot in the NBA. I just think it's really interesting. It's like, it's first knowing yourself and knowing what you need to work on. But then, like you said, it's knowing your team's dynamics and understanding where you're going to get those shots. But it feels like the responsibility is on you as a player to know that.
I mean, I think it's both. I think that particularly in an off season where you're no longer viewed within the confines of a team for this short stretch, right? And I'm always trying, I should say, to think bigger picture of, okay, how does this translate to my role on an NBA team and or with the Miami Heat? And I feel like I'm pretty capable of doing that. Now, whether or not I'm capable of doing that, that gets pressed upon me or anyone once you step into training camp. Because it there's one thing that's pretty clear about the NBA is that roles are pretty well defined, right? Like you know who's on the floor to do what, whose job it is to do this or this, and that's pretty drawn out. Now in the off season, guys have the luxury of being able to like step outside that role that maybe they've been placed in. Now, whether that's a good or bad thing, I think is up for interpretation. I try to look at myself within my role always because I also know that I'm not going to be a 30 ball screens a game guy, right?
Well.
So with that being said, I know where I fit. And that's whatever team I'm on, I kind of know where I fit, and then it becomes, okay, now that I've carved out this little space for me, how do I then make it a little bit bigger? How do I then grow in little areas here, and here, where I just become a little bit tougher to guard or a little bit more effective? So you start to approach it in that way. That's why I think it's a combination of both, in that it's not just on me. I think the responsibility falls upon me to not be delusional, basically,
right?
Because I shouldn't be working on James Harden step backs all summer and then show up to camp like, oh, look what I got in my bag now.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, all right, well, sweet, dude, you can go do that in Serbia.
That would be sweet,
but you can't do it here.